One of the powers that design can bring is really thinking about a new world that is led by biomaterials. All these materials give very different properties and a very new opportunities as well. My name is Karlijn and this is my life in design. I always loved making things when I was a kid. I loved sculpting, drawing, baking things, making things with chocolate. Before I went to university, I was always doing more technical things. Like I had my courses in biology, math, physics, chemistry, and not really anything creative. I was trying to find an area where I could use both technical skills and my creative skills. And after graduating from high school, I decided to do a year in which I would study one day a week in an art school to kind of learn the different things in an art school. To then make up my mind, and that was really helpful to understand a bit more what design is and if I would want to go a bit more on the technical side or more on the creative side of it. During my studies, when I decided to go into product design, I started to become quite inspired by Daan Rozengaarde as well as Marianne van Albel. So they were looking at transforming scientific things into the real world in a very magical way, and I was like, this is such an exciting way of how technical things and science can plug into my interest of creativity. And I really was inspired by them as like, okay, this is how these different things can come together. Often it comes from like real curiosity for something, like a specific material or thing that I want to learn more about. And that is sparking interest for a particular reason. Like, for example, when I was doing my product design studies, there was this project around water. And I started to think about like, okay, I was very fascinated about this process of things could dissolve and almost appear out of nowhere. When you look at salt, for example, when you crystallize them or you dissolve them and they crystallize, it's so circular. You can just recycle it because you can dissolve it and you can appear it again and dissolve it and appear it again. Why are we not looking at salt as a material? So that was quite an unconventional thing to do. But then I looked into, okay, but what are some of the processes that I know as a product designer that we can think about in terms of making objects from salt? And what would it mean if we can actually grow objects rather than building them? So it's been always a bit around like looking at things that were interesting for a particular reason, and I wanted to just dive into it. That genuine curiosity just led me to discover and try new things. And one is like, what if we could do this? And then just trying it out. One of the pinch me moments was with the Wall of Salt project. Me and Hannah Burney, who I work with at Atelier Luma, to make this project, we designed the whole factory to make, so we had those like smaller sizes, but we had to produce thousands of panels, and we designed the whole factory and all the tools and things we had to take to make it happen. And then the summer after I came back and the whole factory was there exactly how we planned it and all the details that we had in it. And I was like, wow, it's happening. Like, we're gonna do this project. It's gonna be massive. We came and the whole wall was installed. And just realizing of like, well, we started like a few years ago with just this one sample that I made in the lab. So this whole wall just grown from salt, that was quite like a pinch of like, well, is this real? And I think for Notpla, it's been really also a bit similar in a way, those moments that we developed the material, you brought it from like a small sample to a bigger sample, but then you see it running on the machine at a big scale and you're just like, wow. It's so nice that you're collaborating with people because you can share those moments. It's one thing to be by yourself in your lab, like, yay, I made this work. But it's like, if you can share those moments, even also moments when it's not working, it's just so much nicer. I wanted to train more my technical side to be able to not just make materials very nicely in my studio, in my lab, but actually to scale them up and bring them into the real world. And therefore I found this study called Innovation Design Engineering at the Royal College of Art and Imperial, whereas a lot of people from various different disciplines, from biology, engineering, even lawyers and designers come together to work on problem solving from all these different directions. And that is actually the same course that Rodrigo and Pierre, the co-founders of Notpla, also graduated from, and I got in touch with them. And for me, this was the perfect place where all these different things come together, like working with materials, doing something that has a real impact in addressing climate change and pollution, but at the same time also working with such a talented team, from scientists to designers to engineers, and being able to work together. Some of the reasons why we use seaweed is because it's quite an amazing crop, to be honest. It can grow really fast, so certain species can grow up to even 1 meter a day. Seaweed has a similar role within the ocean ecosystem that trees might have on land. Actually, if you have different seaweed crops like this, it will actually help other species to thrive inside of the ocean, so fish and other places where they can take shelter. Other reasons why is we don't need to use land, so we don't have to compete for land for growing crops for food. Actually, if you look at it, at the properties and the materiality of the seaweed itself, it actually almost looks like a plastic already by itself. Like, this is just a pure seaweed, and you can see the flexibility and things. If you then think about like a film, it is almost, it makes a lot of sense to make something like that. To go from seaweed all the way to a finished product, so we start with the seaweed itself. There we use different polymers that we extract from the seaweed, which are these ones. And then we're left with this other waste, which we also use. So we take different types of species, we take different types of extracts, we mix it with other different types of natural ingredients and make all these different applications and replacement of packaging products, from quick takeaway to more dry products like this, or things that can actually dissolve in water like your detergent powder or laundry powder. Yeah, so one of the really important thing is we're trying to replace plastic, which is of course massive, is that we source our seaweed in a sustainable way. So we do that through a few different ways. One of the things is that we want to use as much local seaweed as possible. So we like to use waste seaweed, or we like to use beach cast seaweed, but then ideally also cultivate it rather than wild harvest it. So we try to move towards that, but we're always exploring like the different types of species that can be used, but that they can be local also to that environment. We mainly get it from Europe, and we're working together with things like the Seaweed Coalition and different groups that try to build up this and grow the seaweed market in a sustainable way. So it's not just us, we're part of this bigger group that works towards how can we set this up in a good fashion so that we use the best practices and that we're not having a detrimental effect on the environment, but actually a positive impact. And then we've done also some calculations of like, what if we could replace all the plastic in the world with seaweed? How much of the ocean surface would we need? And we came about like, I think 0.6% of the ocean that would be needed for sustainable growth, which is really good and very realistic. A typical week is quite varied, which I love. So there's lots of meetings and different brainstorming sessions happening to think about new ideas. But I would say maybe 10% is in the lab, maybe 20% is relationship building and building out projects, and then the rest goes into like managing different activities, working together with the team. So I lead the innovation team, so we look at the next generation of some of these materials. So could we also do coffee cups, or could we also do windows, or could we have different things that now still are used for plastic? We cannot do them now because natural materials don't have the same properties, as I mentioned before, as plastic. So it's how do we unlock those properties? So it's working a lot together with the material science team, designers, engineers. How are we going to invent the next generation? So that's a lot of my time spent on those activities, managing that, creating the relationships to unlock those ways of developing those materials. I think we're still on the journey to get up to speed with the 150 years that plastic had as a head start. And we're only in for maybe now 8 to 10 years. So trying to rush that, of course, we don't want to wait 150 years. Our revenue that is coming in is directly linked also with the plastic that we're replacing. So the more volumes we sell, it also means that the more plastic we are replacing. So those things are definitely linked. This development of a business model is not something that it just once you make this idea and then it's gonna stay like that the whole time. It's an iterative process, very much like a design process is. You're like testing things out and it evolves. Whilst we're developing as a company, we're learning so much and we're getting that more and more refined. Some of the key challenges are still cost. Plastic is just really, really cheap and it's really difficult to match that. Scaling is very difficult. Like, we're working with a material, as I said before, that's very unconventional, something seaweed and plant, and we're trying to replace plastic that has specific processes and infrastructures in place. And we're trying to match that to work on existing infrastructures in order to scale up as quickly as possible. But it is a natural material. It's not the same as plastic. People want change because they want to move away from plastic, all the things that it has, the that it lasts for so long, but then they want all the things that plastic can do at the moment. They want it durable, they want to have a super high barrier properties. Managing that with clients and with people of like how that change would look like, and that you need to kind of give and take at multiple places if we actually really want to replace plastic. So that's quite challenging. What we try to do to get to scale is to use an unconventional material like seaweed, but make it work on existing machinery. So for example, that's why we work also on extrusion, which is a very common technology within the plastics industry. But it is for us to then actually make it work through the different parameters or the different designs of the machine or different elements of the machine to actually make it work for seaweed. The people that operate these machines are very much used to the normal plastics that work perfectly because the machines were developed to work for plastics, while now we're trying to make the machines that work for plastic work with seaweed. So there's a bit of a learning curve, but that's definitely something that we're able to do and that we're continuously working on. For each product, we're having very different collaborations. I'm starting up now to set up a few new ones with universities, what I'm quite excited about. We have a few collaborations that we're working very closely together with the supplier. So uncovering a bit more seaweed supply, and also how can we optimize the seaweed extraction and seaweed things to fit with for packaging and to replace plastics rather than doing other things where it's normally used for. Those are quite exciting things because those people have a very different world that they're in. Combining those worlds together, then it becomes quite exciting. I think one of the really key partnerships that we had is with Just Eat. They were saying like, actually in the coated boards and the plastic boxes that we normally use, like there's a lot of plastic in there. And because it's all contaminated with food, it cannot be recycled. And then we embarked on a journey with them that now eventually led to us having the coated board as one of our key products. And really from the beginning, we've been working very closely with them on like how to make it work for that specific application. And that has been a really exciting partnership and journey. I think one of the things that I would definitely say is collaborate as quickly as you can, and don't be a bit afraid to dive into the science. Like if that's maybe not your background, but sometimes you might need to go into it a little bit, and finding that expert that knows the things that you don't know and is able to help you with that. And I think there's more and more openness also for doing this collaboration, but I think that's really important of doing this collaboration and making sure that you're crediting everyone that you're working with in a really good way. I think is also very important. I think how designers can help to push for more a planet-focused agenda. As a designer, you come up with proposals, you inform decisions. Either you make them maybe yourself, or you need to present them to someone who's going to then make that decision. And you can have some impact on what you bring to the table, and you can like communicate why you brought that to the table. Like for example, maybe you do one of the briefs that they asked you to do, but maybe there's another version of like, oh, I also did this brief that is this less CO2 reduction, or I thought about like the materials that are proposed is a little bit different, but actually this is the impact that it's going to have. So I think that's one of the ways that you can have, or designing for a regenerative planet agenda. But it could also maybe be through smaller things, by taking initiatives in a company of, I want us to really look at how we have our bins and making sure that we're putting in the right streams, or you can have organize a pickup of litter in your environment, or you can organize a movie night and show something that is a documentary that you're really inspired by, and through that pushing a bit that agenda as well. If you have any impact on like the type of problems that you're working on as a designer, you can maybe bring some to the table of like, oh, I would love to work on this problem. I think we could really make a difference. So I think there's a lot of ways. I think it's really exciting to think about what that future is going to look like. And I think it's one of the powers that design can bring, is really thinking about a new world that is led by biomaterials. And we're having all these challenges of like, oh, but it's not plastic. But all these materials give very different properties and a very like new opportunities as well. And we can, I think, as designers, create a desirable future with those biomaterials. And I can't wait to be more like in my day-to-day life, come across more biomaterials, having much more this feeling of things are healthy, things are closer to nature, just more natural. I think that's going to be really exciting. Design to me means problem solving, creative problem solving, pulling different things together, making different connections, having a new view, being inspired, getting inspiration for myself a lot from nature, and thinking about how we can redesign and rethink systems, materials, products. Eventually we can redesign everything. But yeah, I think it's eventually about problem solving.